This is the first part of our stretching series, why and when you should stretch. If you've ever wondered, should I be stretching at the beginning of my training or at the end? And how do I know? And what's the point of stretching anyway? And aren't there some people that say stretching is bad for you? So should I even stretch at all? I'm going to answer all of these questions in this video. Hi, if we haven't met before, my name is Catherine. I'm the founder and principal therapist at the multi-award-winning clinic, Layton Sports Massage, or LSM. In this channel, I share information about how the body works and simple self-care tips to try and help you get and stay as close to pain-free as possible. Today's video is the first in the stretching series, why and when you should stretch, right? So in part 2 of the stretching series, we talk about the 5 steps to stretching perfection. And in the third part, we talk about the top 5 mistakes that I see people make when they're stretching. But before you learn those things, I think it's worth talking about why you should be stretching, what are some of the benefits of it, when you should be stretching, and to address this whole thing like, is maybe stretching not good for you? Because there are some people who actually think that stretching doesn't have a benefit. So let's first talk about when you should stretch, because this is one of the kind of most common things that I see with people. People are still stretching before they train, before they exercise. And that's actually not a good idea. There is some good research that has shown, number one, if you do static stretching, which is the stretching I'm talking about in this series, which is, holding a muscle in a lengthened position to try and get it to relax for a period of 10, 20, 30, 60 seconds, that it decreases function. So you don't get as good response from muscles if you stretch before you train. And it increases your chance of injury. Now, personally, I think this makes a lot of sense because when you come and see me for a massage is basically the same thing as what stretching does. It relaxes your muscles. And you should definitely not go exercise after you have a massage. You're relaxed. You're not in like a fired up state. I think the reason that people started to stretch before they train is because they noticed that they were tight and they needed to get looser muscles so they felt comfortable training. But the answer to that is stretch after you trained the last time, so you go into it with less tight muscles. Now, you may have heard dynamic stretching or active stretching as part of your warm-up. That's totally fine. I personally don't really like to call that stretching because I feel like it makes everything a bit confusing. Also, because it doesn't really feel like stretching to me. Active stretching or a dynamic warm-up is just simply moving your body through the range of movement, right? So you might do arm circles, you might do knee lifts, you might kind of go back and forth with your arm or your leg. And that is excellent because that's waking up your muscles. That's getting them moving. It's getting them firing a bit, right? So that helps to prepare you. So if you are still doing static stretching before you train, you should stop. Now, I do get people ask me, but like my muscles are so tight. If I don't stretch them, I might have a cramp or I'm worried that it will be too painful. So if that's you, first, do a really good warm-up, okay? So I've got a video and an article about how to warm up properly. It's for runners, but it really applies to any kind of exercise. Watch that video, make sure you're warming up properly, and then check. You might find that you don't need to stretch it anymore because your muscle's loose enough. If the muscle still feels tight, then you have my limited permission to stretch just that one muscle. But what you should be doing is stretching enough after and just in general that you don't need to stretch right before you exercise. Now, let me tell you about the benefits of stretching that I've seen in my clients and in myself. So again, remembering that stretching has a very similar effect on the body as massage, when you stretch, often people feel lighter. right? Because when a muscle is tight, it's kind of like a resistance band that's making it harder for you to move. So if you reduce the resistance by releasing and relaxing the muscle, by relaxing the tone in the muscle, the kind of resting contraction, it's easier to move because you don't have that same resistance. The other thing is, stretching can make your movements more powerful, which seems kind of weird, right? Because I just say it reduces the contraction. But there's this analogy that I like to use. So anytime a muscle is contracting, it's basically going from a lengthened shape to a shortened state, right? And each section of contractible tissue has a limited length. So if you can only go, let's say you can only contract up to this much, and you're already contracted this much, you don't have much space for any power, right? Whereas if you're from here, then you have more distance to contract. The analogy that I use is it's like if you're throwing a ball. If you're throwing a ball and you can only bring your hand back this far and that forward, how far are you going to throw that ball? Not very far, right? You don't have much room. Whereas if you can take your arm all the way back and throw it all the way through, your ball's going to go much further because you have much more space for the contraction, for the movement. And it's not just a theory, right? This is what I see in practice all the time. People tell me they feel stronger when they're doing their exercises after we release their muscles in massage, which is what you do in stretching. So you could have more powerful movements if you're stretching more regularly. And then the last thing is less injury. Now, it's hard to say for sure exactly, I don't know if there's a ton of research on it, but one of the things that we have found with our clients who have regular massages where we're releasing tight muscles is they have fewer injuries. And one of the injuries that seems to happen when people, aren't stretching regularly or getting massages regularly is that it's like the muscle gets tighter and tighter and tighter. And then it's so tight that then you use it again and it gets a little tear or it gets a little injury. And then you have to rest it. And then if you don't release the muscles, you rest, it feels better, then you go, and then it happens again, right? That can also be linked to form. It's not just about muscle tension, but when you're releasing your muscles regularly, you're decreasing the chance of that buildup of tension and then having that problem. So in the beginning, I said when you shouldn't stretch, which is at the beginning of your workout, at the beginning of your training, at least not static stretching that just relaxes the muscles. So when should you stretch? Number 1, stretch after you train. This is the best time to stretch because your muscles are warm. You can undo some of the over and over and over contraction that you have at the beginning, and then it's done, right? You've done it. But I totally understand a lot of people don't really want to stretch after they exercise. They feel tired. They feel wiped out. They don't have a lot of time. So, and this maybe should be another video as well. I think it's totally okay to stretch at the end of the day before you go to bed if you don't have the time or space to stretch right after you train. The only thing you have to be careful of is you're not going to be as flexible when you're not as warm. So just don't expect the same flexibility and you should be fine. So the 2 best times, you can stretch right after you train, and then you can stretch every night before you go to bed. And really, you can build stretching in throughout your day, just as long as you're not stretching right before you exercise for the earlier mentioned reasons, you should be fine. The other thing you need to bear in mind is that you need to know that you're stretching the correct muscles so that you're not exacerbating any imbalances. But I talk more about that in part 3 of the stretching series. So I'll let you watch that one to get the full details on it. Now, lastly, I do want to address that there are some people that say that stretching is not good for you. Now, again, I talk about this more in the 3rd part of the series because I really believe that the people who are saying that stretching isn't good for you are the people who are doing it wrong. There's a lot of things you can do when you stretch that can actually do damage that really isn't good for you. But that doesn't mean stretching is bad. It just means that people need to learn how to do it safely. Some of the things that you can do is if you're stretching something that isn't the underlying cause in an imbalance, you can end up exacerbating an imbalance, making it worse, potentially leading to an injury. But if you always know that you're stretching the right thing, then that shouldn't be an issue. Another thing that can happen is if you are pulling your joint around instead of making sure that you're being safe with your joint and just stretching the muscle, that can also cause a problem in the joint, right? That makes sense. So, and the other thing is, that's two. And then the third thing, I mean, I'm just basically listing all of the stretching mistakes, right? But the other thing is that people will often stretch really hard and then they actually make their muscles tighter, which defeats the purpose of stretching. So I think from what I've seen in 10 years of working with people and telling them to stretch and getting good results in their self-care arena, is that if you're stretching correctly and safely and you're stretching the right muscles, stretching is really beneficial. All right, that's the end of part 1 of the stretching series. I'm going to let you go to part 2, but I'm also going to include the link to part 3 in the description if you'd like to watch that. If you're enjoying this, please like it, share it with anybody you think might find it interesting, and subscribe to our page, subscribe to our channel, or like our page so that you can see more videos as they're released. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.